Hello, my name is Max Bamford. Welcome to my talk. Many illnesses have been around for thousands of years. They've been a mystery. But in 1982, I developed the world's first method of treating chronic fatigue. It's now being used to treat chronic fatigue syndrome and long COVID. In 1998, I invented the world's first standing computer desk. It's now being used to treat the health problems seen in office workers, and between 2014 and 2020 it produced the $6 billion a year sit-stand desk revolution. Today I wish to discuss a conversation I heard about 30 years ago where it was suggested that mental illness is a characteristic of people who are creative and inventive, and that it has an effect that increases their likelihood of being creative in the manner of mind-altering drugs. Well, I don't agree with that, and there are various reasons. One is, for example, necessity is the mother of invention. If people need to solve a problem, that's what motivates them. And intelligent people use logic and reason as their basis, will attempt to solve those problems, and some will succeed. There's also Maslow's pyramid. This identifies that creativity is the top of the personality traits in humans. You may like to look at that in other sources. But today, I'll discuss that issue in relation to three people. Galileo, who developed the concept that the sun is the centre of the universe, and Semmelweis, who developed essentially the world's first germ theory, and Charles Darwin, who developed the concept of evolution, the theory of evolution. Well, Galileo was born at a time when the general view was that the Earth was the centre of the universe. But he used a telescope to confirm the concepts of Copernicus, that the sun was the actual centre. And that was received quite well by many people. A good idea and useful research. However, there were some people who thought that it contradicted the church's the church's teachings that the earth was the centre, and they thought that members of the congregation would start questioning other aspects. So they proceeded to ensure that Galileo was silenced. They put him under house arrest, they burnt his books, and they told him not to discuss his ideas with anyone else. Didn't really affect Galileo in any way, he just continued with his research, or so it seems. But it did mean that the public missed out on the truth for many years. The second person I'd like to talk about is Ignaz Semmelweis. He was a young Hungarian doctor, and he lived at a time when the general view was that diseases were caused by an imbalance in the four body fluids, and that they could be cured with bloodletting, and that diseases could come from miasmas. Well, he worked in the morning in the autopsy labs. That's where they work, where they treat or examine dead bodies. And when he went to the maternity ward, he noticed there's a much higher death rate than in other wards. He came to the conclusion he must be carrying some form of toxin on his hands or his surgical instruments and transmitting those toxins from the dead bodies to the women, and it caused them to die. But he couldn't see any evidence of it. It was purely a logical consideration worth examining. So he washed his hands and his instruments in between those two wards, and the death rate in the second ward dropped by 90%. Now, that's an excellent discovery that would go on to change the world. But his boss, unlike many bosses who are quite respectable people who encourage this sort of thing, was like some bosses, they think they're better than everyone else and they're arrogant. And his boss resented being told what to do by a young doctor. So he ridiculed him. And also at that time, professional people were of the opinion that they were pure and it wasn't possible for them to be transmitting diseases. And they didn't want to think of themselves as being the cause of problems. So Semmelweis had a lot of trouble from then on. But he went from city to city and hospital to hospital giving his talks on his new ideas. And some people thought it was great, worth investigating. But a lot of other people thought it was an insult to them to say that they had to wash their hands. So they ridiculed him. And he became confused because he expected to be treated with respect and he was treated with contempt. And that drove him to drinking alcohol. And then when he attended meetings to give his talks, wherever the audience called him stupid, he replied by saying they were stupid. And he burst out in angry, alcoholic displays of temper. So he got a reputation for being a drunken, angry, an angry drunkard. And as the years went by the time he was 47, people tricked him into going to a mental hospital. And while he was there, some people have suggested he committed suicide, others that he was murdered, but there's also evidence that he wanted to escape from that hospital. He didn't think he belonged there, and he therefore got into a fight with the security people in that hospital, and they injured him, and he died of an infection at age 47. So what's the evidence there? Well, the evidence is he's a perfectly sound, sensible, intelligent young doctor when he started. It was the establishment that drove him crazy, if you're going to call an angry drunk crazy. The third person I want to talk about is Charles Darwin. And he lived at a time when the church was teaching that everybody came from Adam and Eve. And the scientific community established that they were the elite establishment in the world because of their dependence on facts and evidence. And they thought of themselves as being superior people, superior to ordinary people, superior to natives and other life forms, other animals. Well, when Charles Darwin went on his trip by boat around the world, he went to South America and looked at the animals there. And then he also went to the Galapagos Islands. There are a lot of islands there, and they're miles apart. So there's not much interbreeding of species from one island to the next. And he noticed on several islands there's the same type of bird. It was a little bit like a finch, except that on some islands they had large, strong beaks, and other islands they had small, weak beaks. He noticed that the birds with strong beaks were on the island where they had a diet consisting of very hard seeds, so they needed those beaks. And those with the weak beaks were on islands a long way away where they ate insects that only required small, weak beaks to consume those insects. He therefore came up with the idea that there must be a reason for that. And he assumed that if these birds gave offspring, the young who had large, strong beaks on the island with hard seeds would be more likely to survive and thrive than those with small beaks. And so over thousands and thousands of years, the next generation after generation after generation would have, all of the young finches would have strong, hard beaks, whereas those on islands miles and miles away eating insects wouldn't need to develop stronger beaks, so they'd still have the smaller beaks. And that came to come up with the idea of the theory of natural selection. and then later on the theory of evolution, which it applied to all animals, where humans were descended from various other species. And this got him into trouble with the church authorities, because they said we come from Adam and Eve. And it got him in trouble with the scientific authorities because they wanted the public to think they were superior life forms not related to others. So they ridiculed him, and he became known as the Monkey Man through the media. Well, how did he solve that problem? Well, first of all, instead of going to the media where he was being ridiculed for his theory, he stayed in his country mansion. It's probably paid for by his wealthy father, who's a wealthy London doctor. And he did his research and commented on his ideas by correspondence with many friends who he wrote letters to. And they'd go into the meetings. And so they weren't directly being ridiculed and insulted. So they would defend Darwin's theories at those meetings. And when it was necessary for Darwin to publish, he just published. He didn't hesitate. And his book became very popular. However, there are suggestions that he was mentally ill by many people. But was he? I'd like to say two things. Is generally regarded as having some sort of an anxiety disorder. Did he? Well, when he was in England, it was known that there are a lot of anxious people who are too scared to go out of the house. That's a severe anxiety disorder. But Charles Darwin was about to go around the world for an adventure on the high seas, and he was looking forward to it. He wanted to go. So he was the opposite of typical anxious person. And he visited strange exotic lands. So was he an anxious person suffering from a mental disorder? The answer is no. There are other facts to be considered. There's one line of thought that he was bitten by a bug in South America, and that led him on to develop the illness that he had later in life. But I've had a look at his biography, and to me, there's evidence that he had the symptoms of his later illness before he even left England. And it was a mystery then, and some people consider it to be a mystery now. It's essentially the chronic fatigue syndrome, would now be called long COVID. So I'll leave that up to you to do further investigations. But was he mentally ill? Did that cause his creativity? No, it definitely didn't. Curiosity was his drive, and trying to understand the origin of humans was what his motivation was. So all the other ideas, you can look at those yourself if you wish. So at this stage I could draw conclusions about those three people, Galileo, Semmelweis and Darwin. Were they mentally ill? Not when they started. And Galileo wasn't affected at all by all accounts. Semmelweis, if you call a angry drunk mentally ill, I suppose that's there. But not when he started. That's the result of the ridicule that he received from the establishment. And Charles Darwin, similarly, is reasonably well off beforehand, but he was ridiculed. He avoided that by doing his scientific correspondence by letter, didn't have to confront people, and his illness is related to other factors. So there is, coming from this, a concept called the Semmelweis reflex. What is a Semmelweis reflex? Well, this, very briefly, is where the establishment at any time in history will automatically reject new ideas that oppose their own existing ideas almost instantly. And that's what's happened to all three of those people. They produced ideas that were contrary to the well-established ideas of the establishment. It didn't affect Galileo. It didn't affect Semmelweis. Probably not Darwin. So that's something to think about, and you can draw your own conclusions, but check the facts and evidence for yourself. That's what I do, and that's what I recommend you do. And thank you for watching.